Hello, I'm Adinser and this is my Discipline Priest guide for patch 6.2. The Disco Priest, while being amazingly powerful and a must-have for every progression raiding group, is boring as hell to play. It has been gutted since Mists of Pandaria when I mained a priest, and the only fun you can have with the spec is from its niche role in the raid. And that is, put simply, its unique style of proactive healing. In other words, the shields you have at your disposal negate a lot of raid mechanics, and it is fun to do that, especially on progression where it's most needed. Outside of that, there isn't much to look forward to. Atonement healing is gone, and so is the balanced approach between healing and shielding that was once prominent. The only way to heal is by just using your shields and the spells that interact with them, and occasionally using a heal or two. And if this is sounding terrible, well, it is. Disco is, as I said, a great addition to any raid, but is generally disliked in the entirety of Warlords by people that play it. One more reason for that is that there is almost no choice in our talent tree and in our glyphs. But don't let that fact bring you down. You won't know if you dislike the playstyle until you try it. So with that in mind, let's start. I have a feeling that this is going to be a short one. Our main goal as a Disco Priest is to predict raid-wide or tank damage, and negate it as much as we can. So we excel at tank healing and making the raid more pleasant for everyone, except maybe other healers, since they might overheal more than if we weren't there. Though that is not so important and generally not an issue in a raid with good communication. So logically we will start with the shields. Our bread and butter power word shield, it instantly shields a friendly target absorbing damage and cannot be cast again on that target for another 12 seconds or 10 with the glyph of weakened soul, which is pretty much mandatory. The other and in some way more powerful shield is Clarity of Will, and it has a cast time of 2.2 seconds and it absorbs around 20% more than power word shield does, and it can be stacked on the target until the absorb reaches around 80% of your maximum HP. Not really sure about the percentage, though it really doesn't matter since you will almost never stack it to full in any progression fight. Both of these shields can crit, and that is what makes them so strong. If they crit, they absorb double the damage, and you will be spamming them a lot, and I do mean a lot. Then we have our single target healing abilities: Heal, our standard heal, Flash Heal, the stronger but more costly alternative, Prayer of Mending, which is almost never worth casting as Disco, it heals for so little, it's a joke really. Penance, the Disco specific heal, and a really cool and strong one as well. It is a channeled ability and heals 3 times while channeling. It can also do decent damage when cast on an enemy. And I would strongly recommend that you use the Glyph of Penance. It's the most fun glyph we have and it comes in handy literally always. The AoE heals are weak as hell and pale in comparison to Holy's AoE healing. We do have Holy Nova, however, to fill in the gaps in our rotation and help out a little in stacked AoE phases. It is the same as Mage's Arcane Explosion, but it heals a radius around you as well instead of just doing DPS. Prayer of Healing is weak and soaks mana like crazy, same as when playing a Holy Priest, though there is even less opportunity to cast it as Disco. More on that later. And finally Cascade. It's the default pick in the level 90 talent tree again, though if you really want to switch things up, Halo is viable in some situations as well. And those are where you can position yourself so that the edge of the Halo radius hits most of the raids for more healing. We have the same DPS abilities as Holy, but they serve a greater purpose for Disco. Whenever you cast one, so Smite or Holy Fire, you gain a stack of Evangelism. It stacks up to 5 times and you can choose to spend as many as you want, though preferably 5 to increase your healing by a maximum of 25%, and that's 5% per stack, by using Archangel. The other two DPS abilities, Shadow Word Pain and Mind Seer, aren't important. Outside of Archangel we have 3 major cooldowns: Barrier, Pain Suppression and Power Infusion. Barrier is exactly what it says. It is a barrier you can place on the ground and anyone that stands in it will take 25% less damage. Pain Suppression is a single target spell that decreases the damage that the target takes by 40%, so it is generally used on tanks. And Power Infusion increases our haste by 25% and reduces the mana cost of our spells by 20% for 20 seconds with a 2-minute cooldown. There is one passive that you have to keep in, and it procs whenever you use Archangel. It lasts 30 seconds, and in that time the next Flash Heal or Prayer of Healing have 100% crit chance. And it combines well with our other passive that gives a shield whenever you crit with the spell, instead of doubling the heal. So let's see how the spec plays in a raid. There isn't much thought involved outside of predicting what will happen next, and for some people that is enough. Before the fight starts, spamming Clarity of Will and Power Word Shield on the tanks is always a good idea. As soon as the fight starts, do the same. Look closely at the boss and what he does, or at DPM or another add-on you use. Get used to the fight, and then you can use your shields to full effect. If someone has a dot on them, and in most fights there is a dot on at least one person, shield them and consider using Clarity as well. Keep the 2 shields active on the tanks, or just the one tank that has the aggro, through the entire fight. Generally 2 casts are enough for a while, and when shielding someone in order to avoid a mechanic or just reduce the damage they take, cast Clarity 2 times and end with Power Word Shield. Do this and they won't take any damage. Remember that Penance is our strongest single target heal, so if someone is low on HP and you have shielded them already, use Penance. It is also wise to shield someone that has already taken damage. Even though you didn't manage to prevent the damage, you can still save them from dying. If the raid is stacked and you need to AoE heal, consider using Holy Nova and Cascade or Halo. Use Prayer of Healing in combination with the Archangel's passive proc to heal and shield everyone in a group. So while we are at Archangel, the best way to maintain the spell is to use Holy Fire, or should I say Power Word Solace, on cooldown. So as soon as the fight starts, use it and keep using it through the entire fight. Not only does it heal when you damage someone with it, it is also an insta-cast spell, so it is the fastest and surest way to generate Evangelism stacks. You should hoard the stacks until you feel a need to spend them for big healing. So when you use Archangel, it is a good idea to use Power Infusion as well. That way you can throw out big heals faster and with a low cost. The first spell you cast is going to depend a lot on who is taking damage. If there is a group of people that are low, just use Prayer of Healing and then switch to shielding everyone. Your shields are incredibly powerful with Archangel, and if you have a Trinket proc, so use them as much as you can. Not to mention that Power Word Shield has a low mana cost, only a bit higher than Heal. Don't forget to use Solace though, even if you have Archangel on. Use it during the buff and you will have a couple of stacks of Evangelism for when the cooldown of Archangel resets. Then you can use 1 or 2 smites to get 5 stacks faster and instantly have another Archangel ready. Heal and Flash Heal are also worth using with Archangel, since they heal by a lot. So if you shield someone and you aren't worried about your mana, use Flash Heal. If there isn't much damage coming in, Heal is a good choice, though not as good as Power Word Shield, so just try and find your balance. I honestly could remove it from my hotbar, heal I mean, and I wouldn't notice a thing different with my healing. Though it's good to have it just in case, especially since we have so little spells anyway. And lastly, use Barrier when your raid leader tells you, or if you don't have an instruction, use it on incoming huge raid-wide damage, when you're stacking of course. But it's also worth casting if you're not stacked, if you know there isn't going to be a stacking phase later in the fight. That is the gist of the Disco Priest. Simple but efficient. To recap, shield the tanks before the fight and keep the shields on through the entire encounter. Shield everyone that is low or has a dot on them, use Holy Nova and one of the 90 level talents to AoE, and add to that Prayer of Healing combined with Archangel. Remember to use Infusion with Archangel for massive heals. Oh, and I forgot one thing, Prayer of Mending. Use it when you literally have nothing else to do. If no one is taking damage and you have shields on the entire raid. So basically never. As before, let's look at the rest of our spells that can improve our gameplay but not our healing. There is Fate to reduce damage and threat, Silence, which is really useful in raids since healers usually don't have a ranged silence. Only priests and shamans have it, and the shaman one is an interrupt, not a silence. So it's a bit weaker, although it has a shorter cooldown. There is Shadow Fiend for mana regeneration and bonus DPS. Mass Dispel is unique to the priests and is used in a lot of situations and in almost every raid ever. There's Fear, Mind Seer, who cares? There is our Dispel of course, and our Purge. Whenever you see a buff on a mob that is highlighted and sparkling, purge it. It's that simple. Shackle Undead, a hard CC only usable on undead targets. Leap of Faith, the reason I still enjoy playing this class. And Resurrect, the Fortitude buff, and Levitate. So those are the basics of the Discipline Priest. Not much to it to be honest, but if you want a more in-depth discussion on talents, glyphs, macros and stuff like that, then click on the annotation on the screen to go to the second part of this guide. Thanks for watching and see you next time.